George was 30 years old, but his eyes belonged to someone much older. 18 years in prison. Murder. His stepfather. But when he sat across from me, the first words out of his mouth weren't what I expected. I killed him, but I'm not sorry. There's something else I should be sorry for. His hands locked together on his knees, knuckles white. His gaze fixed on the corner of the room, refusing to meet mine. My mother died while I was inside, he whispered. My sister hates me, says it's my fault. A long pause. His throat worked, swallowing something down, and I don't know why I'm still here. That's when I understood. George's real crime wasn't the one on his record. His real burden was something he'd been carrying alone for nearly 2 decades, something that was finally crushing him. As George began describing that night, the night he supposedly killed his stepfather, his body told a different story than his words. I picked up the scissors, he said. But his shoulders didn't tense with remembered rage. His hands trembled, yes, but not with anger. With something else. Fear? Confusion? His eyes moved rapidly, as if searching for a memory that wouldn't come into focus. Where was Lucy? I asked quietly. His entire body went rigid. The air in the room changed, and I knew there was something about his sister he hadn't told me yet. In some sessions, my patients heal as they speak, but some stories stay with me long after the hour ends. Today I'm sharing one of those stories with you. If you're listening and carrying something heavy inside, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what resonates and where you're listening from. I read every comment. Every story matters. If you want to hear more real therapy sessions that I can't forget, subscribe and turn on notifications. If this touches something in you, a like helps me continue this work. And if you have a story you need to tell, my email is in the profile. Remember, our stories begin to heal the moment we speak them aloud. I need to tell you something about George's case before we go further. When I opened his file, I saw a straightforward murder conviction. A 12-year-old boy, his stepfather, scissors, a confession, 18 years served, case closed. But nothing about George fit the profile. Most people who commit violence in childhood, especially patricide, show one of two patterns. Either deep, visible remorse, or complete emotional detachment as a defense mechanism. George showed neither. He was devastated, yes. Broken? Absolutely, but not about the killing itself, about something else. When he walked into my office, I observed a man whose body had learned to make itself small. His shoulders curved inward protectively. Each step was deliberate, careful, as if he was still navigating prison hallways where any misstep could mean violence. His eyes scanned the room, the windows, the door, the corners, before he sat down. Prison does this. It rewires your threat detection system. But there was something else in his posture. Something beyond institutional trauma. Guilt. Not the guilt of someone who killed, the guilt of someone who failed to save. I've seen this distinction hundreds of times. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Tell me why you're here, George, I said once he was seated. His hands immediately clasped together in his lap. The pressure turned his knuckles pale. His jaw worked silently for several seconds before words came. I got out yesterday, he finally said. His voice was rough, underused, 24 hours. And you called me. Yes? Why? Another long silence. His eyes stayed fixed on his hands. Because I can't. He stopped. Started again. Because being out is harder than being in. This is a common phenomenon among long-term prisoners. The structure of incarceration, as oppressive as it is, becomes familiar. The outside world, with its infinite choices, its fast pace, its expectations, can feel more threatening than a cell. George's immediate need to seek therapy within 24 hours told me his internal world was in crisis. He was experiencing what we call gate fever in reverse. Not the anxiety before release, but the collapse after it. This is common. The world moves on while you're inside. You emerge into a place that no longer makes sense, filled with people who look at you like you're dangerous, or damaged, or both. What's making it hard? I asked. Everything. The word came out sharp, then he seemed to catch himself. His shoulders dropped. I'm sorry, I don't mean to. You don't need to apologize for having feelings here, I said gently. He nodded, but the apologizing reflex was clearly ingrained. Years of having your emotions punished will do that. My mother died, he said abruptly, 7 years ago. Heart attack, I was told by letter. His breathing had become shallow, rapid. I couldn't go to the funeral, They denied my request. I'm sorry. Lucy, my sister, she wrote to me once. Just once, after Mom died. His voice cracked. 3 lines. Mom's dead. It's your fault. Don't contact me. The pain in his voice was visceral, raw. Have you tried reaching out since your release? No. He shook his head. What would I say? Sorry I ruined your life? There was something beneath his words, something unspoken. George, I said carefully, tell me about Lucy. And that's when everything shifted. George's breathing changed the moment I said her name. Faster, shallower. His hands began to shake. Not just a slight tremor, but visible trembling he couldn't control. Lucy was 10, he whispered. Just 10 years old. He looked up at me then, and his eyes held something I hadn't seen yet. Desperation. She was supposed to be safe. I was supposed to keep her safe. Past tense. Was supposed to. As if he'd failed. But failed at what? What I was witnessing was a trauma response known as hyperarousal, when the nervous system becomes stuck in a state of high alert. His sister's name was clearly a trigger, the activating memories his body couldn't distinguish from present danger. But there was more here. The way he spoke about protection, about safety. This wasn't just sibling love. This was survivor's guilt. The kind that comes from being unable to prevent someone else's suffering. I needed to understand what had happened to Lucy. And more importantly, I needed to understand why George carried such profound guilt about her safety when he was the one who'd spent 18 years in prison. Take me back, I said. Before that night, what was your home like? George's jaw clenched. He looked toward the window at the gray sky beyond. Home. He said the word like it tasted bitter. I'm not sure I'd call it that. What would you call it? Survival. One word, but it contained multitudes. My real father left when I was 4, he continued, still looking away. I barely remember him, just impressions, a tall shadow, a deep voice, then nothing. He paused. Mom tried. She worked 2 jobs. We were poor, but we had each other. Me, Mom, and Lucy. It was okay. Hard, but okay. His hands tightened. Then Richard showed up. The temperature in the room seemed to drop when he said the name. My stepfather. The way George said stepfather, it wasn't neutral. There was weight to it, history. His whole body had tensed, muscles coiling as if preparing for a blow that was 18 years in the past, but still felt imminent. Richard seemed normal at first, he said. But his fingers were digging into his palms now, nails creating small crescents in his skin. He helped with bills, fixed things, made Mom smile. Then his voice dropped to barely a whisper. We thought things would get better. The past tense hung heavy in the air. They didn't get better, they got infinitely worse. When did things change? I asked. About 6 months after he moved in. George's voice had become flat, emotionless, a common dissociative response when recounting trauma. He started drinking more, coming home late, yelling. He swallowed. The first time he hit my mother, I was 6, Lucy was 4. His eyes glazed slightly, seeing something I couldn't. We were in the living room, playing. I heard glass break in the kitchen, then shouting, Mom's voice high and scared, then a sound I'd never heard before. What kind of sound? Like a slap, but heavier, a thud. His breathing quickened. I ran to the kitchen. Mom was on the floor, blood coming from her nose, Richard standing over her. His hands began shaking. He looked at me, his eyes were wrong, empty, and he said. George stopped, swallowed hard. He said, this is what happens when women don't listen. Go to your room. Did you? I froze. I was 6, I didn't understand, so he came toward me, grabbed my arm so hard it bruised, dragged me to my room, threw me inside, locked the door. His voice cracked. I could hear Mom crying through the wall. All night. This was George's first experience with intimate partner violence, and it established a blueprint that would define his childhood. Children who witness domestic violence undergo a specific type of trauma. They learn that violence is unpredictable, that protection is impossible, and that they are fundamentally powerless. For a 6-year-old child, these lessons become foundational beliefs about how the world works. George's brain was being wired for trauma at the most critical developmental period. The locked door was particularly significant. It represented literal physical powerlessness, a forced separation from his mother when she needed help. This experience would echo throughout his life, culminating in that final night with Lucy. Did it happen again? I asked, though I already knew the answer. All the time. George's voice was hollow. Once or twice a week at first. Then more. Richard would come home drunk and find any excuse. Dinner was cold. The house was messy. We were too loud. He paused. He'd hit Mom. Sometimes he'd hit me too if I tried to stop him. He never hit Lucy though. Not at first. What do you mean, not at first? George's face darkened. When Lucy turned 8, things changed. He went quiet. The silence stretched. I waited. He started paying attention to her. The way he said it made my stomach turn, but I needed him to tell me in his own time, in his own words. What kind of attention, George? His hands curled into fists. His knuckles went white. Then his whole body began to curl inward, protective, as if he was trying to make himself smaller. The wrong kind. I needed to proceed carefully here. George's entire body was radiating distress. His breathing had become shallow and rapid. His shoulders were drawn up toward his ears. His gaze had fixed on a point on the floor. Classic signs of approaching a memory still capable of overwhelming him. George, I said gently, keeping my voice soft and steady, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me what happened to Lucy. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. He hurt her, he whispered. And I couldn't stop it. I tried. God, I tried. But I was just a kid and he was so much bigger and stronger and His voice broke completely. Tell me what you tried to do, I said softly. George wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. I noticed Lucy changing. She got quiet, stopped playing, started having nightmares, would scream in her sleep. His voice was thick with emotion. One night I woke up to crying. I went to her room. She was in the corner, curled up, shaking. He took a shuddering breath. I asked what was wrong. She wouldn't say, just kept crying, so I stayed with her, held her all night. Did you ever find out what was happening? The next morning I saw bruises, on her arms, her thighs, places clothes would hide. His fists clenched tighter, his jaw was working, grinding his teeth. I knew, even at 10 years old I knew what those bruises meant. What did you do? I told Mom. His voice turned bitter, sharp with anger that had festered for 2 decades. I begged her to do something, to make him leave, to call the police, to protect Lucy. And? She said I was imagining things, that Richard would never do that I was being dramatic. His whole body was rigid now. She looked me in the eye and told me I was wrong. But I could see it, behind her eyes. She knew. She just didn't want to face it. What George was describing is a devastating but common dynamic in abusive households. The non-abusing parent often enters a state of denial because facing the truth would require action they feel incapable of taking. George's mother was likely a victim herself, economically dependent on Richard, psychologically worn down by years of abuse, perhaps suffering from her own learned helplessness. But her failure to protect her children created a different kind of trauma for George. We call this betrayal trauma. The realization that the person who should protect you has chosen not to, or cannot, wounds differently than the abuse itself. It attacks the foundational trust a child needs to feel safe in the world. For George, this betrayal would compound every other trauma that followed. Why couldn't she leave him? I asked. Money, security. George's voice was thick with contempt. She convinced herself it wasn't that bad, that we needed him, that she had no other choice. He looked up at me, his eyes red and raw. But she did have a choice. She chose him over us, over Lucy. Every single day for 2 years she chose to look away while he couldn't finish. His hands were shaking violently now. How long did this go on? I asked gently. 2 years. From when she was 8 until... He stopped. Until that night. The night Richard died. Yes, I could see him bracing himself, gathering courage for what came next. Tell me about that night, George. Take your time. He closed his eyes. His breathing became deliberately controlled, as if he was trying to manage a panic response. It was a Friday. I was 12. Lucy was 10. Richard came home around 8, already drunk. His eyes remained closed as he spoke. He started yelling at Mom immediately, about nothing, just yelling. Then I heard the sound, the hitting, Mom crying. His hands began to shake again. Then he went toward Lucy's room. His eyes opened. They were distant, seeing something else, something terrible. I heard her door open, heard her voice, "No, please, not tonight." A tear slid down his cheek. Something broke in me. I couldn't let it happen again. I just couldn't. What did you do? I asked. George's whole body tensed. Every muscle went rigid. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the first thing I saw. His voice had dropped to barely a whisper. Big kitchen scissors, sharp, heavy in my hand. He was staring at his palm now as if seeing blood that was no longer there. I ran to Lucy's room. The door was open. He had her cornered. She was crying, begging. His breathing became labored. I shouted at him, told him to leave her alone. He turned. He was furious, started coming toward me. Another pause, longer this time. And then, it gets blurry. Memory gaps during traumatic events are extremely common. The brain has protective mechanisms that shut down certain recording processes when we're overwhelmed. This is why trauma survivors often can't recall specific details or have fragmented memories. But George's gap felt different to me. It was too specific, too clean. He remembered everything up to a certain point, running to the room, confronting Richard, raising the scissors, and then nothing until he found himself holding bloody scissors with Lucy frozen nearby. This kind of precise gap often indicates not just trauma-induced amnesia, but something else. A memory that's been actively suppressed because acknowledging it would be unbearable. Blurry how? I asked carefully. George's forehead creased with concentration. I remember shouting. I remember raising the scissors. I remember him coming at me. And then he opened his eyes, looked at me with genuine confusion. Nothing. It's just blank. The next thing I clearly remember is blood. So much blood. And Lucy standing there, frozen, and the scissors in my hand. This memory gap was significant. George, I said carefully, where exactly were you standing when you came back to yourself? His brow furrowed deeper. I was, near the doorway, I think. And Lucy? She was closer to Richard, standing over him. And the scissors? In my hand. He looked down at his palms as if seeing them stained, covered in blood. But you don't remember the actual stabbing? He shook his head slowly. No, I've tried. For 18 years I've tried to remember that moment. But it's just gone, like someone cut it out of my memory. This was the moment, the crack in the story. George, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it before you answer. He looked at me warily. When you found yourself holding the scissors, were you actually holding them? Or had someone just placed them in your hands? His face drained of color. I don't. Close your eyes. I said gently. Go back to that moment. Don't try to remember, just feel. What do you feel? He closed his eyes, his breathing slowed. For almost a minute, he sat in silence, then his eyes flew open. Wait, he whispered. I feel weight in my hands, like something was just placed there, like someone. He stopped, his face crumbling with realization. Oh God. Lucy, George whispered. The word came out broken, strangled. Lucy grabbed the scissors from me. The pieces were clicking into place now, each one more devastating than the last. I charged at him, but I couldn't do it. I froze. And she was behind me. She took them from my hands. He couldn't finish. His whole body was convulsing with sobs now. She was 10 years old, he said through the tears. Just a little girl. And she killed him because I couldn't, because I failed her. What was emerging was a classic case of traumatic dissociation and memory reconstruction. George's mind had created a narrative that allowed him to function. He killed his abuser. He went to prison. It was his choice, his sacrifice. But the truth had been buried beneath that constructed memory, protected by layers of dissociation. The reality was more complex and more painful. His 10-year-old sister had been the one to commit the act, and his 12-year-old self had made a split-second decision to take the blame. This wasn't just trauma. This wasn't just sacrifice. This was a child trying to save another child in the only way he knew how, and it had cost him everything. I didn't stab him, George said, his voice breaking with each word. Lucy did. The words hung in the air like smoke. She grabbed the scissors from behind me. I heard her scream, this high, desperate sound. And then I felt them press back into my hands. Still warm, slick with blood. I looked down and they were there. In my hands. Richard was on the floor. And Lucy, he sobbed. Lucy was looking at me with these huge, terrified eyes, like a trapped animal. And I knew, in that instant, I knew what had just happened, and I knew what I had to do. What did you do? I told her to go to her room, to wash her hands, to stay quiet no matter what. I told her I would handle everything. And when the police came, I told them I did it, that I killed him. I confessed immediately, gave them every detail I could think of, made it sound planned. made it sound like I'd been waiting for the chance. His face was wet with tears. She was only 10. I thought if I took the blame, she could have a normal life. She could grow up without this hanging over her, without being labeled a killer, without being destroyed by what she'd had to do to survive. So you went to trial, I said softly. George nodded, unable to speak. You confessed to murder, at 12 years old? And your mother? What did she do? George's expression hardened, the grief transforming into something sharper, angrier. She told Lucy to stay quiet, told her never to speak about that night, told her to let me take the fall because I was older, I was the boy, I could handle it better. His voice was caustic with bitterness, and Lucy did exactly what she was told. She stayed silent, and I went away. And Mom? He stopped, his jaw clenching. Mom lived with that guilt for 11 more years until it literally killed her. What was the trial like? I asked. Fast, I pled guilty. My lawyer tried to argue self-defense, abuse, temporary insanity, but I'd already confessed. The evidence was clear. My prints on the scissors, my statement. He paused. They sentenced me to juvenile detention until 18, then adult prison for the remainder, total of 18 years. And Lucy never testified. They never called her. Why would they? I'd confessed. They had their killer. His voice was hollow. She sat in the courtroom. I saw her there, next to Mom. She looked so small, so scared, and I wanted to tell her it was okay, that this was the right thing, but I couldn't, so I just looked at her and tried to tell her with my eyes. Tell her what? That I loved her, that she was safe now, that she could forget. A bitter laugh escaped him. I was 12 years old, and I thought I could carry this for both of us. I thought I was strong enough. George had been a child himself when he made this decision. At 12, his brain wasn't fully developed. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term planning and understanding consequences, doesn't mature until the mid-20s. He couldn't have truly understood what 18 years in prison would mean. He couldn't have predicted the institutional trauma, the abuse, the isolation, the loss of his entire developmental period. He was a frightened child, making what he thought was a noble sacrifice. And the system, designed to protect children, failed him completely. No one questioned his confession. No one investigated further. No one asked if there might be more to the story. They took a 12-year-old's word at face value and sent him away for nearly 2 decades. Tell me about juvenile detention, I said. George's expression went blank again. That dissociative flatness I was becoming familiar with. It was. He searched for words. It was like stepping into another world. A world where everything I knew about safety and kindness just didn't exist. His hands rubbed his arms unconsciously. I was 12, small for my age, quiet, scared. The older boys, 15, 16, 17, they saw me coming from a mile away. What did they do? Everything. His voice was flat, detached. They took my food, beat me up, stole my clothes, made me their errand boy, called me names I'd never heard before. He paused. The guards, some of them tried to help. Some of them, but most of them just looked away, and some of them. He stopped, his jaw clenched. Some of them participated. I waited, letting him find the words. There was one guard, Miller. He worked the night shift. His whole body tensed. He used to come to my cell late, after lights out, when no one else was around. George's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure the other boys knew I was a snitch. And snitches don't last long in juvie. What did he do, George? He shook his head. I can't talk about Miller, not yet, maybe not ever. Sexual abuse in juvenile detention is tragically common and catastrophically underreported. For male survivors especially, the shame and stigma make disclosure nearly impossible. George had gone from witnessing his sister's abuse to experiencing his own violation. This cyclical trauma, seeing it happen to Lucy, then having it happen to him, created a devastating psychological pattern. He couldn't save her, and he couldn't save himself. This reinforced every lesson his childhood had taught him, that he was powerless, that violence was inevitable, that no one would protect him. The trauma was layering, compounding, creating a psychological weight that would have crushed most people completely. How long were you in juvenile detention? I asked gently, moving him away from Miller. 6 years, from 12 to 18. Then they transferred me. What was that transfer like? For the first time, something like dark humor crossed his face. Terrifying, Adult prison makes juvie look like summer camp. In what way? The violence is more organized, more brutal. In juvie, it was chaos, random attacks. In adult prison, everything has rules, hierarchies. You have to figure out where you fit or you don't survive. He rubbed his face. I was 18, fresh from juvie, still small, still quiet. I became a target immediately. What happened? The usual. Fights, beatings. I learned to fight back, but I wasn't good at it. Got hurt a lot. His voice remained flat, emotionless. And then there were others. Older inmates who saw an 18-year-old kid and thought. He stopped. I don't want to give details, but it happened multiple times over the years. George, I said carefully, what you're describing is sexual assault. Multiple assaults over years. He flinched at the words. I know what it's called, but saying it out loud makes it real. His hands were shaking now. I spent 12 years in adult prison, 12 years of constant fear, of watching my back, of not being able to trust anyone, of being hurt in ways I can't even. He stopped, breathing hard, and the whole time Lucy was out there, free, living her life, becoming successful, while I was being. He couldn't finish. The resentment and love and guilt were all tangled together, choking him. The sexual violence George endured in prison added another devastating layer to his trauma. Male survivors of sexual assault face particular challenges. Societal messages tell them they should have been able to prevent it, that it makes them weak, that speaking about it threatens their masculinity. For George, who had already internalized deep shame about failing to protect Lucy, these assaults reinforced his core belief that he was powerless, inadequate, deserving of punishment. This is the insidious nature of long-term trauma. It doesn't just hurt you, it convinces you that you deserve to be hurt, that this is all you're worth. Did you have anyone inside? Any allies? I asked. George thought for a moment. There was an older guy. Marcus. He'd been inside for 25 years. Life sentence. What was he in for? Doesn't matter. But he kind of took me under his wing, taught me how to survive, how to stay alert, how to fight when I had to. That sounds important. It was. Marcus is probably the reason I made it out alive. George's voice softened slightly. He died 3 years before my release. Heart attack in his cell. I was one of the last people to see him. I'm sorry. Me too. He was the closest thing I had to family inside. The word family seemed to trigger something. His face darkened. That's when Mom died too. The same year as Marcus. I got the letter from Lucy right after Marcus died, like the universe was just taking everything. The loss of Marcus, followed immediately by news of his mother's death, represented a critical breaking point for George. These were his only connections to anything resembling care or family. Marcus had provided mentorship and protection. His mother, despite her failures, had been his mother. Losing them both in quick succession while still imprisoned, unable to grieve properly, unable to attend funerals or find closure, created what we call complicated grief. This is grief that can't be processed normally because the circumstances prevent it. For George, this grief sat in his chest like a stone, unresolved and unmourned, for the final 3 years of his sentence. Tell me about when you found out your mother died, I said. George's jaw tightened. I was in my cell. Mail call. Guard handed me a letter. I recognized Lucy's handwriting. He paused. I hadn't heard from her in 11 years, not once, so I knew it couldn't be good news. What did the letter say? 3 lines. That's it. Mom died, heart attack, it's your fault. His voice cracked on the last words. I read it maybe 20 times, trying to find something else in it, some hint of, I don't know, regret, forgiveness, but there was nothing, just blame. How did that make you feel? Destroyed, angry, guilty, all of it at once. He looked at me. Part of me knew she was right. If I hadn't taken the blame, if things had been different, maybe Mom wouldn't have carried that guilt. Maybe it wouldn't have killed her. But you were 12. You were trying to save Lucy. I know, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it are different things. I requested to go to the funeral, George said quietly. Filed all the paperwork. Made my case. I'd been a model prisoner for years. No incidents, no violations. His voice turned bitter. They denied it, security risk, they said. As if I was going to escape from a funeral surrounded by guards. He looked down at his hands. So I sat in my cell while they buried my mother, And all I could think was that she died believing I was a monster, died carrying guilt that should have been Richard's, died without ever knowing why I really did what I did. The denial of George's request to attend his mother's funeral was another institutional cruelty that compounded his trauma. Funerals serve a critical psychological function. They provide closure, allow for communal grieving, and help survivors begin the process of accepting loss. For George, being denied this ritual meant his grief remained frozen, unprocessed. Combined with Lucy's accusatory letter, this created a devastating cocktail of emotions: grief for his mother, anger at the system, guilt that he'd somehow caused her death, and rage at Lucy for blaming him when he'd sacrificed everything to protect her. These emotions had nowhere to go, no healthy outlet, so they festered inside him for the next 7 years until his release. "How did you cope after that?" I asked. "I didn't. Not really, I just existed. Went through the motions, work detail, meals, exercise, yard, cell, day after day after day." His voice was hollow. "I stopped thinking about the future, stopped hoping for anything, just counted days until my release date." "Did you plan for your release?" "No. How do you plan for something you can't imagine?" "I'd been inside since I was 12. I didn't know how to be a person outside." He paused. "The last 3 years were the hardest, because I knew I was getting out eventually, but I also knew I had nothing to get out to. No family, no home, no skills, no idea how to live in a world that had moved on without me." "When did you first learn Lucy had become successful?" I asked. George's expression was complicated, pride and pain mixed together. "About 5 years before my release. Another inmate was reading a magazine, fashion magazine, and there she was." His voice caught, full-page spread, Lucy Bennett, up-and-coming model, beautiful, confident, smiling. "How did that feel?" "Like being stabbed all over again." He looked at me. "I know how that sounds, selfish. But seeing her there, living this glamorous life while I was—" He gestured at himself. "While I was rotting in a cell for something she'd done." "It's not selfish to feel that," I said gently. "You sacrificed everything for her. It's natural to feel complex emotions about seeing her succeed. I wanted her to succeed. That was the whole point. But I also," he struggled with the words, "I also wanted her to remember, to acknowledge what I'd given up, to at least know." Over the next few years, he saw her more and more. Magazine covers, billboards visible from the prison yard, TV commercials playing in the common room. Lucy's face was everywhere, a constant reminder of what his sacrifice had bought her, and what it had cost him. The other inmates would make comments, he said quietly, about how hot she was, about what they'd like to do to her, and I'd just sit there, couldn't say anything, couldn't tell them she was my sister, because then they'd ask questions, his fists clenched. It was torture, seeing her succeed, being happy for her, being angry at her, missing her, hating her, all at the same time. This ambivalence, pride and resentment coexisting, is completely normal in cases of sacrifice, especially when the sacrifice goes unacknowledged. George loved his sister deeply, and would make the same choice again. But that didn't erase the reality of what he'd endured. Watching her succeed from prison was both the fulfillment of his sacrifice and a painful reminder of everything he'd lost. These contradictory feelings didn't make him selfish or ungrateful for his choice. They made him human. My role was to help him see that he could hold both truths simultaneously. He saved Lucy, and that cost him everything. Both things could be true. Neither negated the other. "Tell me about your release day," I said. George let out a long breath. "Surreal, that's the only word for it. They gave me my clothes, the same clothes I'd worn at 12, obviously didn't fit anymore. They gave me $200, and they opened the gate. And then I just stood there, on the other side of the gate, paralyzed. I didn't know where to go, what to do, how to even begin." He rubbed his face. Everything was different. The cars looked different. People were staring at their phones. These devices I'd only heard about. The buildings had changed. Even the air smelled wrong. "Where did you go?" "Homeless shelter. It was the only address I had. They helped me get a temporary ID, helped me apply for assistance. And that's when I found your number. In a pamphlet about re-entry services. And you called me the next day." 24 hours later, yeah, because I woke up in that shelter and realized I survived prison. But I don't know if I can survive freedom. "The hardest part," George said, his voice barely above a whisper, isn't the stares or the fear or the confusion about how to use a smartphone. He looked up at me with hollow eyes. The hardest part is that Lucy's out there, living 10 miles away according to the internet. And she has no idea. She thinks I'm a monster who killed our stepfather and destroyed our family. She doesn't know I saved her. She doesn't know what I gave up, and I don't know if telling her will help or destroy her. His voice broke. How do I live with that? What do you want, George? I asked. If you could have anything right now, what would it be? He was quiet for a long time. I want her to know the truth. Not for gratitude, not even for forgiveness, just, I want her to know why. Why is that important to you? Because right now she thinks she's the victim of my violence. She thinks I destroyed our family. She carries guilt about Mom dying because I was in prison, and all of that is based on a lie. He looked at me intently. If she knew the truth, maybe she could stop carrying that guilt. Maybe she could understand. Maybe we could both finally. He trailed off. Finally what? Finally be free. This was the therapeutic crossroads. George had carried this secret for 18 years, and it was destroying him from the inside. Lucy had likely suppressed the truth, and it was manifesting as inexplicable guilt, anxiety, and relationship difficulty she couldn't name. The question wasn't whether the truth should be told, it was how, and with what support system in place. If Lucy's psyche had constructed a protective barrier around this memory, demolishing it suddenly could cause significant harm. But if done carefully, with proper therapeutic support, the truth could liberate them both from the prisons they'd each been living in, his literal, hers psychological. I have her number, George said suddenly, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. You do? I've had it for years, found it online, I'd typed messages 100 times, never sent them. He showed me his phone, draft after draft, all saying variations of the same thing. Lucy, I need to talk to you. What stops you? I asked. Fear. What if she blocks me? What if she doesn't believe me? What if telling her destroys her? He looked at me desperately. What if the truth is worse than the lie? Or, I said gently, what if the truth is the only thing that can set you both free? He stared at the phone. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to decide right now. But George, I want you to consider something. You've spent 18 years protecting Lucy from the truth. But maybe she doesn't need protecting anymore. Maybe she needs to know. He took a shaky breath. What do I say? The truth. Tell her you need to see her, that there's something about that night she needs to hear. His finger hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity. Then he pressed it. The message was simple. Lucy, it's George. I need to talk to you about the night Richard died. Please, just once. He set the phone down like it had burned him. Now what? Now we wait. The minutes stretched like hours. George couldn't sit still. He stood, paced to the window, sat again, stood again. His hands kept moving, touching his face, running through his hair, clenching and unclenching. Then his phone buzzed. The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. George froze, staring at the device as if it might explode. It's her, he whispered, not reaching for it. What if she's angry? What if she tells me to never contact her again? His hand trembled as he finally picked up the phone, read the message, and his entire face crumbled. What does it say? I asked gently. He showed me the screen with a shaking hand. What do you want? 3 words, cold, guarded. But, she'd responded, she answered, he said, almost in disbelief. After 7 years of silence, she actually answered. What do you want to say back? He typed slowly, deliberately. There's something I need to tell you about that night. Something you need to hear. Please, can we meet? Just one conversation. Send. The wait was excruciating. George was barely breathing. Then, I don't want to talk about that night. His face fell. She doesn't want to know, he said. Maybe I should just... Keep trying, I encouraged. She's scared, but she responded. That means part of her wants to know. He typed. I understand, but this is important. It's about the truth. Please. Another agonizing wait. Then finally, fine. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the coffee shop on 5th Street, 1 hour. That's all you get. George looked at me with a mixture of terror and hope. She said yes. She said yes, I confirmed. Now we need to prepare you for what to say. Lucy's willingness to meet, despite her resistance, suggested that on some level she needed this conversation too. Her defenses were up. I don't want to talk about that night. but she agreed anyway. This indicated internal conflict, a part of her that knew something wasn't right about her memories of that night. The unconscious mind often knows truths that the conscious mind has suppressed. Lucy's anxiety and guilt, symptoms she'd likely been experiencing for years, might have been her psyche's way of trying to bring the suppressed memory to the surface. This meeting could be the key that unlocked that door. What if she doesn't believe me? George asked. Then we deal with that. But George, you need to be prepared for the possibility that she might remember once you start talking. The truth might come flooding back. And if it does, then she'll need support. Just like you do, but at least you'll both finally know what really happened. We spent the rest of the session preparing him, what to say, how to say it, how to handle her potential reactions, denial, anger, grief, or sudden memory return. When he left my office that day, he looked both terrified and lighter somehow, as if the possibility of truth had already begun to lift the weight. George came back 2 days later. The moment he walked through my door, I could see the change. His shoulders weren't quite as hunched. His eyes, though red and swollen from crying, had a different quality. Not the deadness I'd seen before, but something alive. Raw, but alive. I told her, he said before he even sat down. I told Lucy everything. He sank into the chair and covered his face with his hands. And she remembered. Sarah, she remembered. Tell me what happened, I said gently. George took a shuddering breath. I met her at the coffee shop. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back. He paused. She looked scared and angry, and like she wanted to run. But she stayed. We got coffee, sat down, and for the first few minutes we just stared at each other, neither of us knowing how to start. How did you begin? I told her I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I wasn't asking for anything. I just needed her to know what really happened that night. He wiped his eyes. At first she said she knew what happened, that I killed Richard, that I went to prison, that Mom died because of what I did. She was angry, defensive. What did you say? I said, Lucy, I need you to really think back to that night, not what you've been told, not what you think happened, but what you actually remember. George's voice dropped. She said she remembered, said she was in her room, heard shouting, heard Richard fall, then police came and I confessed. And then I said, do you remember the scissors? Do you remember holding them? And she froze, completely froze. This was the moment of therapeutic truth, when the suppressed memory begins to surface. George's specific question about holding the scissors was brilliant. He wasn't telling her what happened. He was asking her to access the memory herself. This is crucial because memories that are told to us can be dismissed as lies. But memories that we retrieve ourselves, that we feel in our bodies, are undeniable. Lucy's freeze response suggested the question had hit something deep, something her conscious mind had been trying to keep buried. What happened next? I asked. She went completely pale, started shaking, and she said, no, I was in my room. I couldn't have. George's voice was thick with emotion, and I said, close your eyes, go back, really go back. You weren't in your room, Lucy, you were there, you saw Richard coming at me and you. What did she do? She closed her eyes, and she was quiet for so long I thought she was going to get up and leave. But then she started crying, not just crying, sobbing, these deep, body-shaking sobs. George wiped his own eyes, and she said, I took them from you, the scissors, I took them from your hands. You were frozen and he was coming and I just acted. She opened her eyes and looked at me with such horror. I killed him. Oh God, I killed him. What did you do? I held her. Right there in the coffee shop. Held her while she cried. And I told her it was okay, that she was just a little girl, that she was protecting herself, protecting me, that she had nothing to be ashamed of. Lucy asked me why, George said, why I took the blame, why I let everyone think I was the killer. Why I went to prison for 18 years for something she did. He looked at me with red, exhausted eyes. And I told her the truth. That she was my little sister, that she was 10 years old, that I couldn't let her go through what I knew would happen if she was charged, that I'd rather lose my own life than watch her lose hers. His voice broke. She said, but you did lose your life, you lost everything. And I said, I know, but you gotta keep yours, and that was worth it. What else did Lucy say? I asked. She asked about prison, about what happened to me, and I didn't know how much to tell her. What did you decide? I told her some of it, the basics, that it was hard, that I was hurt, that I survived. But I didn't give her details. I didn't want her to carry that too. He paused. She said she's been in therapy for 7 years, for anxiety, for nightmares she couldn't explain, for this feeling of guilt that she couldn't name or understand. The suppressed memory was manifesting as symptoms. Yeah. Her therapist told her she might be dealing with some kind of childhood trauma, but Lucy couldn't remember what. Now she knows. How did she seem when you left? Devastated, but also relieved, like a weight had been lifted even though it was the worst weight imaginable. This paradoxical feeling, devastation and relief occurring simultaneously, is common when suppressed traumatic memories surface. The devastation comes from having to consciously face what happened. The relief comes from finally understanding symptoms that previously made no sense. Lucy had been living with free-floating guilt, anxiety, and nightmares for years, without knowing their source. Now she knew, and knowing, as painful as it was, gave her power. She could finally begin to process the trauma properly, instead of having it leak out in inexplicable symptoms. This was the beginning of real healing for both of them, though the road ahead would be long and difficult. Lucy wants to go to the police, George said quietly. She does? She says she needs to tell them the truth, to clear my name, to stop living with the lie. And what did you say? I told her no. His voice was firm. She was 10, it was self-defense. There's no point in dragging this up legally, it would only hurt her. What was her response? She said she needs to do it, for herself, for me, to make things right. George looked at me. I told her I'd support whatever she decides, but that my record doesn't define me anymore. I know what I did, I know why, and I'd do it again. Do you mean that? He nodded slowly. Yes, because the alternative, Lucy going through the system as a 10-year-old killer, would have destroyed her. At least this way, she got to have a life. Even though it cost you yours? Even then. There's something else, George said, his hands twisting together. Lucy told me Mom knew. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. On her deathbed, Mom apparently told Lucy's boyfriend, Lucy wasn't there, that she knew. That she'd always known it was Lucy, not me. That the guilt of letting me take the fall had been eating her alive for years. He looked up at me with devastated eyes. She knew, Sarah. She knew I was innocent, and she let me rot in prison anyway, because it was easier than dealing with the truth. How did that make you feel? I asked. Angry, so fucking angry. It was the first time George had cursed in our sessions. She could have come forward at any time, could have told the truth, could have gotten me out, but she chose to stay silent, just like she chose to stay silent when Richard was abusing Lucy. His hands were shaking with rage. She chose herself, over and over, and in the end it killed her anyway. The guilt killed her, but not before she let me waste 18 years. That's a profound betrayal. It is, and I don't know if I can forgive it. Maybe I will someday, but right now, I'm just angry. George's anger was not only justified but necessary. For years he'd tried to understand his mother, to find empathy for her impossible situation. But learning that she knew the truth, that she knowingly allowed him to suffer for Lucy's act, was a different level of betrayal. This was active complicity, not just passive failure to protect. Anger is a healthy response to betrayal, and George needed to feel it fully before he could ever hope to process it. Rushing to forgiveness would only bury the wound deeper. He needed to sit with this anger, to let it burn, before he could begin to work through it. Where do you go from here? I asked. Lucy and I are going to try to rebuild our relationship, slowly. What does that look like? We're meeting once a week, just coffee, talking, getting to know each other again. A small tentative smile crossed his face. She's helping me with basic things. How to use my phone, how to navigate the bus system, how to apply for jobs online, all the stuff everyone else knows but I missed. That sounds important. It is. She introduced me to her boyfriend last week too. Guy named Marcus, actually, same name as my friend who died in prison. How was that? Awkward at first, but he was kind. Lucy told him everything, the whole truth, and he just accepted it. Said I did something incredibly brave. George shook his head. I don't feel brave, but it was nice to hear. I got a job. George said, and for the first time since I'd met him there was something like pride in his voice. Construction, it's manual labor, hard work, but honest. He flexed his hands, showing me calluses forming. My boss knows my record, he hired me anyway, said everyone deserves a chance. His eyes met mine. I'm not good at much, but I can lift things, I can follow instructions, I can show up on time. He paused. It's not much, but it's something. It's a start. This was a crucial development. Work, especially physical work, provides multiple therapeutic benefits for trauma survivors. It offers structure, purpose, physical exhaustion that helps with sleep, and tangible evidence of capability. For George, who had spent 18 years being told he was worthless, being able to contribute something concrete was rebuilding his sense of self-worth. The fact that his employer knew about his record and hired him anyway was particularly significant. It provided counter-evidence to George's belief that he would always be defined by his past, that no one would ever see him as anything more than an ex-convict. I still have nightmares, George said quietly. Every night I'm back there, in the cell, or in Richard's house, or in Lucy's room watching her suffer and being unable to move. His jaw clenched. Sometimes I wake up and forget where I am. I panic, think I'm still inside. How long does it take you to reorient? A few minutes, but those minutes are terrifying. My heart's racing. I'm covered in sweat. I can't breathe. He looked at me with exhausted eyes. When does it stop? When do I get to feel safe? George's nightmares were textbook complex PTSD symptoms. His brain was still processing years of accumulated trauma, and sleep was when those unprocessed memories surfaced most vividly. The disorientation upon waking, not knowing where he was, indicated his nervous system was still stuck in threat mode, unable to fully accept that he was safe now. Treatment would require patience and potentially multiple modalities: trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, possibly medication for sleep. But the fact that he was functional during the day, building connections, working, these were all positive indicators. He was more resilient than he realized, even if he couldn't feel it yet. Will I ever be normal? George asked. Will I ever just be a regular person who doesn't carry all this? I chose my words carefully. Normal is relative, George. You've been through things most people can't imagine. That changes you. But yes, I believe you can build a meaningful life. It won't look like the life you might have had, but it can still be good, still be yours. What does that look like? It looks like what you're already doing. Working, reconnecting with Lucy, coming to therapy, building a routine, finding small moments of peace. I paused. Healing isn't about going back to who you were before. That person is gone. It's about becoming someone new, someone who can carry what happened and still choose to live. I did something I haven't done in 18 years, George said, a small tentative smile appearing. I went to a park. I just sat on a bench and watched people, families with kids, couples holding hands, dogs running around. His smile faded slightly, and I realized I have no idea how to be part of that world anymore. I'm 30 years old and I feel like an alien visiting Earth for the first time. Were people staring? I asked. No, that's what surprised me. Nobody even noticed me. I was just another person on a bench. But in your mind? In my mind, I was this giant flashing sign: convict, murderer. Broken. The reality was different. Yeah, I was invisible, which was both relieving and lonely. What would have made it better? He thought about it. Maybe if Lucy had been there, or someone who knew me, someone who made me feel like I belonged. That's something you can work toward. Each positive interaction builds on the last. Tell me something good that happened this week, I said. George thought for a moment. I slept through one night, Tuesday night. No nightmares, just sleep. That's significant. It felt like a miracle. I woke up and it was morning and I just slept like a normal person. What do you think made the difference? I don't know, maybe exhaustion from work, or maybe, he paused, maybe it was because I'd had dinner with Lucy that evening, and we laughed about something, actually laughed, and I went to bed feeling, not happy exactly, but not alone. So connection helped. Maybe. I want to believe it did. This single night of uninterrupted sleep was more significant than George realized. It indicated his nervous system was beginning, slowly, tentatively, to recalibrate, to recognize that he was safe enough to fully rest. The correlation with positive connection, dinner with Lucy, wasn't coincidental. Our nervous systems co-regulate through safe relationships. When we feel genuinely connected to someone who cares about us, our body receives signals that it's okay to lower its defenses. For George, who had lived in hypervigilance for 18 years, one night of peace was a profound neurological shift. It was evidence that healing was possible. I think, George started, then stopped, started again. I think I might actually be okay someday. Tell me more about that. It's not something I can explain, it's just a feeling I had this morning. I woke up naturally, if not from a nightmare, and for about 10 seconds before I remembered everything, I just was present, not scared, not guilty, just alive. His eyes met mine. It was only 10 seconds, but it was something. It was proof that it's possible to feel okay, even if just for a moment. That's huge, George. Those moments will get longer. You think so? I know so. You're doing the work. You're facing the pain instead of running from it. You're building connections. That's how healing happens. Lucy asked me yesterday what my dreams are, George said quietly, and I realized I don't have any. I don't dream about the future because for 18 years I didn't think I'd have one. He looked down at his hands, calloused now from work, stronger than when we'd first met. My only goal was survival. Get through the day. Don't get hurt. Don't break completely. He looked up. So now what? Now that survival isn't the goal anymore, what am I supposed to hope for? What did you tell Lucy? I asked. I told her the truth, that I don't know yet, that I'm still figuring out how to exist, let alone how to dream. And what did she say? She said that's okay, that we'll figure it out together, that she'll help me learn how to hope again. He smiled slightly. She's trying so hard. I can see her trying. And that means everything. What would you want to hope for if you could? George was quiet for a long time. Small things, he finally said. A place of my own. Not much, just a room I can close the door to and feel safe. Maybe some books. I used to love reading. That's a beautiful start. And maybe someday I could go back to school. Get my GED. Learn something. Become more than just an ex-con with a construction job. His voice grew stronger. Maybe I could help other people coming out of prison. Because I know what it's like. I know how hard it is. This was the crucial shift from survival to living. For 18 years, George's goals had been immediate and basic. Don't get hurt. Don't break. Now he was beginning to think beyond the present moment, to imagine a future that included not just safety, but purpose. His desire to help others was particularly significant. It's a well-documented phenomenon that trauma survivors often find the deepest healing through helping others who've experienced similar pain. It transforms their suffering from meaningless to meaningful, from waste to wisdom. George was beginning to see that his experience, as brutal as it was, had given him unique understanding that could benefit others. This was the seed of post-traumatic growth. 3 months after our first meeting, George came in for what would be our final regular session before transitioning to monthly check-ins. He looked different. Not healed. Healing isn't that simple or linear, but changed. There was color in his face. His shoulders weren't permanently hunched. When he walked, it was with purpose rather than the shuffle of someone expecting a blow. I have news, he said, settling into the chair that had become familiar. I'm listening. Lucy and I went to our mother's grave, together, first time either of us had been there since the funeral. How was it? Hard, really hard, but also necessary. He took a breath. We talked to her, both of us, told her things we never got to say when she was alive. Lucy told her she forgives her. I told her. He paused. I told her I understand, that I know she was broken too, that I'm working on forgiveness but I'm not there yet, and that I'm going to be okay anyway. Do you believe that? That you're going to be okay? I'm starting to. Some days are terrible. Yesterday I had a panic attack at the grocery store. Too many people, too much noise. But today's better, and that's more than I had a month ago. What does good look like now? I asked. I laughed with a coworker yesterday, actually laughed, not just smiled politely, over something stupid, a joke about the foreman's coffee addiction. But it felt normal, like maybe I can be a person who has normal interactions. He smiled and it reached his eyes. And Lucy and I are planning a trip, just a weekend, to the mountains. She says I need to see trees that aren't in a prison yard. That sounds wonderful. It's terrifying and wonderful, both at the same time. That's okay, both can be true. Sarah, George said as our session was ending, if you ever tell this story, only with your permission and with details changed. I know, but if you do, tell people something for me. What's that? Tell them I don't regret it. If I had to choose again, I'd make the same choice, because Lucy deserved a childhood, she deserved a chance at life. He paused, his eyes holding mine, but also tell them it's okay to ask for help. That you don't have to carry everything alone, that surviving isn't the same as living. His voice grew stronger. Tell them that 18 years in prison didn't break me. What almost broke me was thinking I had to stay broken. But I don't. None of us do. We can choose to heal. We can choose to live, even after the worst things, especially after the worst things. George still comes to see me once a month. He's working full-time now. He and Lucy have dinner every week. Sometimes they cook together at her place, and she's teaching him recipes he missed learning. He's enrolled in a GED program and attends classes twice a week. He's made a friend at work, someone who also has a record, and they look out for each other. He still has nightmares, but less frequently, maybe twice a week now, instead of every night. He still struggles with crowds and sudden loud noises. He still carries deep shame about the sexual violence he endured. He still has moments where he doesn't believe he deserves to be alive, but he's building a life, not the life he might have had. Not the life anyone would choose, but his life. And he's choosing it every single day. Last month he told me he'd started volunteering at a re-entry program, helping newly released prisoners navigate their first weeks of freedom. He said it was the first time since prison that he'd felt truly useful. That's what resilience actually looks like. Not bouncing back, not pretending trauma didn't happen, but carrying it forward while still choosing to live. Still choosing to hope, still choosing to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. George taught me something profound, that sacrifice and healing can coexist, that protecting someone you love can cost you everything and still be worth it, that the human spirit can endure incomprehensible pain and still find reasons to keep going. His story isn't over. Healing is ongoing, non-linear, full of setbacks and small victories, but he's no longer just surviving. He's living, and that makes all the difference. I hope this story helped you see your own life, your feelings, or the people around you from a different perspective. I hope it helped you understand yourself and others a little better. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What resonated with you? What would you say to George if you could? How does his story connect to your own? If you want to share what's going through your mind, you can write to the email address on my profile. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the bell to be notified about future real-life therapy stories. Remember, our stories begin to heal the moment we speak them. You don't have to carry everything alone.